Okay, so I'm going to use this 4-part processing system. I'm going to draw it right here just so you remember. So we have phonological, orthographic, meaning, and context. So you can see those are my 4 parts to the 4-part processor. Remember, I start at the bottom and I work my way up. I'm going to model this in terms of instruction because I always say, this is my lesson plan for good instruction. And so it's really important that we can see how this can be applied. And Jody mentioned how one of her teachers is kind of using this to help teach vocabulary. So we'll start with, I could use this processing system as a lesson plan to teach vocabulary. Are you ready? I just learned this new word this morning. So when I wake up in the morning, I check my word of the day. And so this is my new word. I figured, oh, how perfect to use this word today. The word is redolent. Let's say the word together. The word is redolent. Redolent. So my first thing I'm going to do is tap into my phonological processor. We're repeating the word. And then we're going to watch as I tap the syllables, and you're going to tap the syllables too. Ready? Redolent. Redolent. And it could be an ul or an ill, and I'll explain that in a second. Redolent. 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 And I might point around the classroom with my students. As I point to them, I'll ask them to name a syllable, and to make sure that my students are awake, I'll say red-o-int, red-o-int, red-o-int. So now they've gotten this phonological, right? We've tapped into that processing system. They've got some phonological memory going on now for this word, redolent. And now I'm going to write the word down for you. Here to go. And I'm going to scoop the syllables. And as I scoop the syllables, oops, I should probably move this particular chat for you. Okay, as I scoop the syllables, we're going to read them together. Here we go. Red, o, int. Do it again. Red, o, int. So now I'm tapping into my orthographic processor because now I have given you the print. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the print because in this particular first syllable, I have a closed syllable. So my vowel is going to be short because it's a closed syllable. But then in this syllable here, we say ul or ill. And the reason is because this syllable kind of comes out like a schwa sound. Although it should say all. We don't say redolent. Because it's an unaccented syllable, we might sometimes say redolent or redolent. And when we say that, it's because if this is an unaccented syllable, it's a schwa. So you might hear people say redolent or redolent. So redolent, redolent. And then my last syllable here is a closed syllable. This should say sometimes it sounds like an F, but sometimes it too can sound like a schwa sound because it's an unaccented syllable. But here my vowel is short. So redolent is my word, redolent. Now I've tapped into phonology, I've tapped into orthography, and I've built a strong foundation here. We know that meaning is linked strongly to phonology. We're more likely to remember the meaning when we link it to phonology. Anita Archer just talked about that. It went in her presentation at Plain Talk About Learning, but also Stanislaw Dehaene talks about that when he talks about those regions in the brain. I'm going to turn this over for a second. My temporal and frontal lobes process both meaning and phonology. Both of them are processed right here in my temporal and my frontal lobes. So they are strongly related. They are communicating. So phonology helps to anchor meaning, which is why I made you tap out those particular syllables. Okay, so now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the meaning. And so the meaning of redolent, redolent is an adjective, so we're going to describe something. And we're going to describe something that either has a smell, a certain smell, or it could be something that reminds me of someone or something else. So redolent is an adjective that describes something that has a smell, but it can also describe something that reminds me of something else. And so now in my meaning processor, I'm not regurgitating a dictionary definition. I'm going to give you something user-friendly. I'm going to move to context because On its own without context, that meaning means nothing. I have to connect it to context. So maybe we'll talk about that. My house, people often say when they walk into my house that it's redolent of garlic and onions because it really does smell like garlic and onions almost all the time because I like to cook Italian food. It's something my family enjoys. So my house is definitely redolent with the smell of garlic and onions. What we could say the redolent rose, meaning it has a smell. Although I took my daughter to the woods the other day for a walk, and the woods were redolent, but not with a good smell. They were redolent with the smell of fish because it had rained so much and everything was damp and moist. And we kept walking around going, it smells like fish in the woods today. So it was a redolent experience, definitely. But I could also say, because redolent has to do with something that has a smell, but also reminding me of something else. I could say today's fashions are often redolent of the fashions of the 80s and 90s. I noticed, my kids wear those pants that are tapered, and that's very redolent of when my husband used to peg his pants back in the day. So redolent can be something that reminds us of something else, but also redolent could mean having a smell. Okay, then that context really solidifies that, though. I've got to use it in context, and I would also tap into context from words in my text. I would pull out the sentence from the text that has that particular word. So that's the 4-part processing system to teach vocabulary.